Welcome to Period 4, The Rise of Political Parties in the Era of Jefferson, Lesson 4.2. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to explain the causes and the effects of policy debates in the early republic. So we're going to start off and rewind a little bit to remember the first party system was established during the Washington and Adams administrations, and it divided politics into the Federalists under Hamilton, who were the commercial elite, and the Republican Party under Jefferson and Madison, who were more for the working class people. There were several key issues that differentiated the two parties in the 1800s. The first was tariffs, and tariffs are central government taxes on imported goods. So when you import an item into the United States, the government puts a tax on it, which makes that item more expensive. The purpose of the tariffs is to protect American business from foreign competition. So a consumer having a choice between American-made goods and foreign goods will probably choose the cheaper American-made goods. Federalists loved tariffs. They wanted them to be as high as possible to dissuade foreign competition and to protect the growing American industrial manufacturing and commercial sector. Republicans, however, opposed the tariffs because their working class people were the ones who often had to pay the higher prices that a lack of competition created in the United States. Second, when we look at the federal government and the powers of the federal government, the Federalists supported strong central government laws like the Alien and Sedition Acts because they argued that they kept the country safe and protected law and order, as well as made us economically more powerful. Republicans, however, supported the idea of the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions that state government had to be supreme when it came to that balance because state governments were closer to the people and more likely to protect their individual rights. Finally, when we talk about relationships with European powers, we have the age-old argument. Federalists put their weight on the side of Britain because it developed stronger commerce and trade and business, while Republicans, who aren't looking to grow the national economy as a commercial one, instead see us as a farming country who's going to expand out west where farmers will be self-sufficient, growing the crops that they need to feed their families. So Republicans were more supportive of closer relations with France because ideologically, the American and the French were closer aligned with their values of individual rights. So if we take a look at the court system, the way the Constitution structures the federal courts is that it says there are federal courts, and then it turned it over to Congress to create them. And then the president nominates justices for the federal courts, and the Senate confirms those justices as receiving their positions. So in the early years of the Republic, Washington and Adams nominated all the federal judges who were Federalists, and the Senate, which was Federalist, approved them. So the federal courts were strongly under the control of the Federalist Party, and those judges served for a lifetime. Chief Justice John Marshall, who was a Federalist, oversaw the Supreme Court making two very important decisions that are called landmark cases because they established precedent or rules for future actions. The first case is called Marbury versus Madison, probably the single most important case the Supreme Court has heard. Once John Adams realized that he had lost the election to Thomas Jefferson in 1800, he was a little sketchy, and he got together with the Republicans in the Senate, and they created a bunch of new federal judge positions, and Adams nominated a bunch of Federalists, and the Senate confirmed those Federalists right up to the last hour of Adams' time in office. So those Federalist judges who were created at the last minute are called the midnight judges, and they would serve on the federal courts for the rest of their life. Jefferson and Madison said, that was not cool, guys. You should not have done that. We don't have any opportunity to appoint our own Republican people to the federal courts. You filled every position. So Jefferson told Madison, don't deliver those commissions to those judges. We don't need them. We're just going to sit on them here, and they won't be judges, and everything will be fine. Well, one of those judges, a Federalist named William Marbury, wanted his job. And so he went to the Supreme Court. And Marbury said the Supreme Court had the power to force Secretary of State James Madison to deliver those papers, which would make him a federal judge. He said the Supreme Court had that power to command Madison to do something under a law passed by Congress and signed by the president. So John Marshall, who was Chief Justice, and the rest of the Federalists on the court faced a dilemma. If they issued the court order telling Madison to deliver that paperwork, Jefferson and Madison flat out said they were going to ignore it, and the court would have no way to enforce their decision, and they would be humiliated and look powerless in front of the entire country. However, if the court refused to issue the order, then it would look like the Federalists were backing down to Jefferson and the Republicans. And again, they would be embarrassed and look powerless. It's a lose-lose dilemma. So what John Marshall comes up with in the decision he issues in Marbury versus Madison is, hey guys, I actually can't issue any orders to government officials. That federal law that said the Supreme Court could do that, that actually goes against the Constitution. It's not one of our powers. Therefore, that law is unconstitutional, and we can't make a decision in this case. And by doing that, and by the Supreme Court giving itself the power to determine what is or is not a constitutional law, they have earned the right of what's called judicial review, the ability to check the legislative and executive branches when they work together to pass laws. It will become the most important power the Supreme Court has, and the most important check the judicial branch has on the legislative. The other case is that of Mcculloch versus Maryland, and that goes back to the Bank of the United States Hamilton created as part of his economic plan. If you remember, the bank collected federal revenues, tariffs and taxes, and then it gave out loans to commercial people. In the South and in the West, the farmers felt like the bank was just taking their money and giving it to the business people, and they opposed the bank, and the Republicans opposed the bank as well. And so Maryland issued a tax that said the Bank of the United States will pay this heavy, heavy tax within the state of Maryland. They're asserting their right as a state government to tax something, and that tax was so high it would have put the bank out of business, effectively destroying it within Maryland. So Mcculloch, who ran the bank, filed suit and said, no, the federal government is supreme to the state governments. The Constitution says that. So therefore, a state institution cannot tax a federal institution. Maryland cannot do that. We're above them. Maryland countered with the argument called strict constructionism, which says the Constitution must be read word for word, and nothing in the Constitution says Congress can create a bank. So the Bank of the United States shouldn't exist to begin with. It's not a national government power. Creating banks is a state power. So again, Chief Justice John Marshall and the Federalists on the court have to find a way to try to salvage Hamilton's plan, but also stay within the law of the Constitution. So in Mcculloch versus Maryland, they ruled that one, Congress has implied powers created by the elastic clause of the Constitution. And just because something isn't specifically written in the Constitution doesn't mean that Congress doesn't have the power to do it. That's called loose construction, reading the Constitution between the lines. The other thing that Mcculloch said was that the federal government is supreme to the states under the supremacy clause of the Constitution, and as such, federal institutions cannot be taxed by the states. So all the way around, it was lose-lose for Maryland and a big win for the Federalist and national government power. When Jefferson becomes president in 1800, he has the opportunity to exercise some federal power of his own. Now, keep in mind, Jefferson came to office with this idea the president and the national government should do as little as possible. I want you to keep that in the back of your brain as we talk about the Louisiana Purchase. So let's rewind back when we talked about the Declaration of Independence and how it inspired Toussaint Louverture and the slaves of Haiti to rise up in revolution against the French colonials. And it became a long, prolonged fight in Haiti between the French army of Emperor Napoleon and the Haitian rebels. Napoleon, surprisingly to the French, could not win a victory against these black rebels in the South. And he's desperate for money. His treasury is empty. So he offers to sell the United States the Louisiana Territory, which is France's land that exists between the Mississippi River and somewhere over by the Rocky Mountains. Nobody was 100% sure where it actually ended, but white people hadn't been there yet. Jefferson thought this was great. He said, oh my gosh, that will open up the western United States. Think how many small farmers can move out west, farm self-sufficiently. It's the vision of America that I wanted. Our country will be boundless and endless. However, he had a constitutional drama because as a strict constructionist, Jefferson had no ability to purchase Louisiana. It doesn't say that the national government can do that in the Constitution. So Jefferson said, well, we have to pass an amendment. We have to change the Constitution. And these cabinet members went, no, Tom, you can't do that because the Federalists will block that in Congress. They'll block that in the states. They won't allow you to pass that amendment. You have to adopt loose construction. And so Jefferson admitted that loose construction was a thing and purchased Louisiana, doubling the size of the United States. It was a great move for him as president, great move for the country, but it violated his ideological principles. Once we had acquired the Louisiana Territory, Jefferson said, now we need to see what it is. So he organized what's called the Corps of Discovery, CORPS, better known as the Lewis and Clark Expedition. It was a group of military people and scientists and explorers Jefferson organized under Meriwether Lewis and William Clark to go out from St. Louis and explore the new territory with two purposes. The first was to map it and see what we actually had, what's out there, and to establish borders with British Canada and say, this is ours, this is yours. Jefferson was afraid English people would cross the border and claim Louisiana as their own. The second purpose was to make trade agreements with Native American people and study the new flora and fauna, plants and animals, and all the new discoveries that Jefferson was personally curious about on the Louisiana Territory. Lewis and Clark traveled from St. Louis out to Oregon and back again, encountering numerous native nations. To help them navigate that, they had the assistance of a Native American woman named Sacagawea, who served as a translator and helped bridge the gap between the cultures, and a slave named York who went along, who also worked with Native American nations to help develop a relationship with the United States. So while Lewis and Clark were the first white people to cross the continent, lest we forget, there was an enslaved African person that went with them as well, and they could not have done so without the assistance of a Native American woman named Sacagawea. That's all for today, folks. Have a great day.